And we are back again. Ooh. Oh, hey, you're on that side of the screen this time.
I know we switched. I hope you don't mind, because I figured that you were just always right.
Well, Sorry, I got distracted because I was like, "Oh, the music is still playing," and then I was like, "Wait, no, I muted it. We're good. We're fine."
Good. But yeah, we're back.
We're back. You're back. You are no longer convalescing. Yeah.
Thank you.
How are you feeling? Are you recovered?
I'm recovered. I'm feeling much better.
Excellent.
And it is no fun. Everybody, please be safe out there.
Yeah.
But you held down the fort last week. It was a great session from what I saw.
Yeah, held down the fort. Really enjoyed having Drew on. Which is something that we might do a little bit more in the future. Try and get some other voices on here as guests to share their expert opinions instead of me just saying whatever. But we got some fun stuff to talk about today. My microphone is peaking a little bit, so I'm just going to turn that down slightly.
You sound great.
It's thank you so much. I mean, we were talking earlier about just getting right up on there on the microphone and doing a nice
the radio show thing.
Just doing an NPR style broadcast today. So today we're going to be talking about a couple interesting stories, but I'm not going to torture everyone's ears with that.
Cool.
But we do have some interesting stuff to talk about. But how was your once you recovered? Did you have a good week? Things going well over there?
I did. Things are quite well. And just working on house projects, having a good time. It is summertime here in Florida, and that means that it rains every day. So I get to deal with that kind of stuff, but it's otherwise I'd say things are quite exciting. No complaints all around. A lot of things happen this week, when we get to our news stories, and I think people are going to like it.
Yeah, a lot of things went down. I mean, nothing. We didn't really pick this week anything kind of too crazy for what we were going to talk about. And there wasn't really that I saw. There wasn't much like really big breaking like, oh, hey, someone took down another government or something.
Nothing of that sort.
Yeah, we talked a little bit last week about Conti breaking up into smaller groups and how the Costa Rican stuff was kind of like potentially a smoke screen for that as it was happening. And that was, I think, like the last really huge thing that kind of came out. But so this week, some lighter stories, perhaps. Yeah. So I think we want to start off.
Should we introduce that this is GPS Live for the week?
We should. We actually should do that.
So welcome everybody to GPS Live for the week of May 27th, 2022. And yes, we've already kind of kicked into our first story here.
Before we do that, though, we should also just introduce, you're Jonathan and I'm Tristan.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Singer.
And I'm Tristan Morris. And now we can actually kick off because we are professionals.
We do have one thing, though. Let's go ahead and real quickly remind everybody that the opinions expressed by the host of the live stream are their own and not necessarily reflecting the official opinions of GuidePoint Security. Thank you for that. All right. So our first story, you want to kind of kick us off where Twitter kind of went wrong here?
Yeah,
and we're not just talking about Elon Musk at all.
Yeah,
this is their own problems.
Yeah, this is well, I mean, it's definitely probably going to impact some things. But yeah, this is an interesting one because we were talking a couple weeks ago, I think, about the shift that we've seen from the federal perspective around cybersecurity, starting with the really strong mandates that came out last year, the executive orders that really set a new direction for cybersecurity within the government, and then the way that we've seen different agencies starting to crack down on misuse and mishandling and misconfigurations around security. And so this story is pretty interesting. Twitter has reached a deal with the FTC to pay a $150 million penalty over the misuse of customer data that was allegedly, at least to the customers, it was said that they were providing security data as far as their phone number, identifiable information, things like that. And then that got turned around and used for targeted advertising purposes, which is a real
clear things up. $150 million civil penalty that technically, so and this is quoted, to represent about 3% of Twitter's revenue in 2021 alone. That's a chunk.
That's a hefty chunk. I mean, when you're talking about companies and corporations that are this large and this massive in the overall scheme of things, that's kind of that could be a drop in the bucket for some of these larger companies. But when you look at it from what I'm really interested in is the amount of time that they may have been doing this, and the amount of money that they may have made from that, and how much of that money that they made directly from this misuse is that 150 million accounting for. But it is a settlement that they reached with the Biden administration Federal Trade Commission to make amends for their violation of the 2011 consent order between the FTC and Twitter. And that agreement was made in 2011 to stop Twitter from doing exactly this, from misrepresenting how they were going to use.
And to put up a little frame on that context, right? The violations took place between 2013 and 2019, where apparently Twitter was asking its users for information regarding emails and phone numbers for security purposes, which is always the best reason, right? Stuff like multi-factor authentication, right? If Twitter, texts you as the 6-digit PIN to get back in your account or something,
right?
It just so happens that they allegedly also took these emails and phone numbers and kind of, I guess, pipelined it right into their advertising.
Just throw that right at the algorithm to chew it up and spit out. But 6 years, 2013 to 2019, that they collected this. It's the Justice Department complaint. Mentions that this affected up to 140 million people. So you're looking at $1 and change per person that they have to pay for this. I think it's in a blog that was posted on Wednesday, the Twitter's chief privacy officer, I'm looking at the name to make sure I don't mess it up, Damian Kieran, said that user data may have been inadvertently used for advertising, in quote. So that is the quote. And it's interesting just to kind of look at it from the perspective that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, which is just like this push towards overall the idea that while this may not be directly cybersecurity related, right? This was a company using the cover of cybersecurity and using the cover of account security to collect information and collect data from people, and then turning around and using it. And we've talked before on the show about the initiative between Google and Microsoft and Apple to kind of clear up passwords and like expose how much data is being collected and what it's being collected for. And giving you control over how that's used. And we said before that all starts with transparency. And that I think is one of the key things that I like about, seeing this kind of action take place, is that it's pushing companies to be fully transparent and punishing them when they are not. And that will lead to better cybersecurity overall for people, because when people can actually control what data they're putting out there and why they're putting it out there and know what it's going to be used for, they're going to put less sensitive information out into the world. And that will lead to better cybersecurity across the board, because you won't have, an employee whose cell phone number gets stolen by someone and then used to come after your company because the spoofing the number, like all kinds of things that can happen once that data is out there.
Yeah. And so, well, like you said, I hope that this sets a precedence that, selling customer information without disclosing it properly, giving users appropriate access to information, and to be able to make that decision whether or not it's used for advertising purposes. I mean, I think it's all going in the right direction when it comes to user privacy. And I mean, this is one of those cases where we hoped that it was being used purportedly for the right things. and it
Right.
just so happens that it wasn't. And so I'm interested to see what the final outcome of this. It does note here in the article, which by the way comes from the Wall Street Journal, that it was a settlement that was unanimously approved on a 4-1 vote. So I don't think there was any question about what's about to happen.
4-0.
4-0. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
unanimous.
4-0.
What am I talking about? 4-0.
It's also you mentioned the ongoing like effects of this. I think it's also key to mention here that the FTC order in the agreement also requires Twitter to notify any affected customers. So be on the lookout if you have a Twitter account to see if this might have impacted you. They have to alert the FTC of any future data breaches, and they also have to undergo an independent security audit every other year for the next 20 years.
Oh, sounds like they're in trouble.
It's weird to think about. It's weird to think about that 20 years from now, Twitter might still exist. Like for some reason, they've been around for like a decade already. But my brain
MySpace is still here.
Yeah, but in my brain, I'm just like, no. Well, there will be completely new stuff by then.
Yeah.
We'll all be doing something else.
Well, when it comes to government policy and kind of setting a precedence, I think that's a really good segue to help push us into our next story here. And I'm also doing a little T-shirt tribute here because I'm a big fan. But the next story on our radar is that the Space Force, right? Everybody's favorite newest military branch, is setting a standard for commercial satellite security. And this is so cool because it relates a lot to a story that you and I did a couple weeks back on CISA, speaking to satellite communication security. But as of this week, May 26th, for those that are tuning in live, the Space System Command rolled out a new process. And this is specifically to assessing cybersecurity of commercial partner satellite operations that do business with the Department of Defense, or DoD contractors. Think of this as, a new guideline that these individuals who do business with the Department of Defense have to follow, which I think is fantastic as a first step in the right direction, especially because the CISA alert reminded us very kindly that satellite communication systems are very old and legacy compared to maybe our standard desktop security that we're used to today.
Yeah. And it's the large portion of the change that they're making here is that now these commercial companies will be able to pass a overall cybersecurity evaluation for pre-approval, so that they no longer have to go through individual evaluations for each and every contract that they go through. Now, I think there's kind of like cases that you could make both ways for which of those would be better. Do we want them to be audited every time they're about to provide a service, or do we want to audit them ahead of time and assume that audit stays true? I think for kind of the pace at which we're moving and at which we're kind of rapidly overhauling our communications infrastructures and the way that the world works, and the way that we deliver different forms of data, and how important satellite communications is to that. I'm on the side that I think removing roadblocks from new stuff happening is good. So making it a overall audit. But I'm trying to find the exact quote here of exactly what they said.
And you have a military background, which, by the way, thank you for your service. Did you notice that satellite communication is still a major component of what we're dealing with today?
Specifically, I worked in signals intelligence, right? So I had to study and know a lot about the communications infrastructure that flows through satellites, and how various pieces of that work. The global infrastructure, and of course our particular country's infrastructure for satellite communications is key to not only all military operations, but almost at this point all civilian life, right? And when you have also these companies that are coming up now that are like SpaceX with launching satellites and for spreading internet around the world and stuff like that, and those companies largely they make a lot of money by accepting federal contracts. So having this kind of framework in place to say, we're going to come in and your overall cybersecurity standards have to meet XYZ before we will even consider working with you. And then doing that not on an individual contract basis, but just on a pre-approval basis. I would have to like dig into the actual requirements. Have they changed what they're looking at when they do the pre-approval versus the individual contract? But I would assume that the pre-approval will be much more broad in scope. Because you're, instead of evaluating the individual pieces of a company that are going to affect just that contract, you would have to evaluate everything about the company because anything could come under scope in the future.
And something that's interesting also that's happening in conjunction with the this approval process, right, that's rolling out, is there's also a cyber warfare unit that's being put together by Space Force. In fact, they're calling it Space Delta 6. And they're going to be responsible for overseeing, military satellite control network and cybersecurity operations. So we are looking at the future of cyber warfare in the hands of the Space Force. So a lot of things that are really progressing and happening this week in that area.
Which was predominantly in the past the scope of the Air Force, right?
Okay.
They were really responsible for the kind of cyber warfare. I'm pretty sure, I believe it was the Air Force was responsible for that in the past. So taking that over under the Space Force, and I think honestly that's I laughed at the name just because the name Space Delta 6 does sound so much like it sounds so much like you some writer in a writing room for like Call of Duty 19 would be like, all right, Space Delta 6 SEALs are on the move. But yeah, bringing this under the scope of the new branch, I think is going to be really important because they're going to be able to set standards and change the way that they operate because they're so new and so young from the ground to handle this, or from the ground up as they're building to handle this specific mission. Whereas other branches, right, are working on old requirements and on old rules and on all of these old things. Like when I was, in the past at my last company, one of the things that I kind of did and helped out with a little bit on the side is I met an officer in the Marine Corps who was trying to stand up a cyber unit for the Marine Corps. And basically what they were looking at was, how do we just take civilians, normal people who already work in IT and already work in cybersecurity, and fast track them into the Marine Corps without having to do everything that a rank and file Marine would do. Basically,
so like the easy boot camp version.
Yeah, well, I mean, just basically make it like we're going to put these people, on base. They're going to be embedded with units. They're going to be running cyber operations. And they need to have the same respect. They need to be able to give orders and they need to be able to make decisions, which means that they would need to be recognized by the rank and file Marines that they're with as Marines and having authority. But you're also not going to get your average cybersecurity guy, your average IT guy to be like, yeah, I'll go to 3 months of boot camp. Like that's just not right. That's not what it is. So how could we build a unit that would be able to do that, or build a structure that would be able to do that? And the reason that they had to go through that though was because trying to get people who are members of the traditional forces up to speed on exactly what they needed to know and educated and all of these things, to move all that through these kind of like old rusty cogs of the military would have taken forever. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, interesting development as far as, what we were talking about before, the satellite communications, how important that is, and the government really starting to take the reins on setting standards.
It is. And so now we're talking about a couple weeks now in a row. We're talking, satellite communication has been a key detail and privacy has been a key detail. You want to kick us into our next story here that's a little bit less on policy and a little bit more something that personally hits home with me.
It's home for Jonathan.
Yeah.
This is a lighter story. I mean, a lighter story so far as as what it covers, but probably not a light story for some people.
Yeah.
So over the last recent bunch of time, when did this actually take place? This story was published on May 23rd. This is coming from The Verge, which also, by the way, I don't think we mentioned, spacenews.com is where we found the story for the Space Force rolling out cybersecurity standards. So on The Verge, we found this story. Some hackers breached the Zola wedding registry website, and got access to some accounts, and then used the payment details that were associated with those accounts to make fraudulent purchases.
Yeah.
And probably really ruined the wedding budgets of a few unlucky people.
Yeah, and so I'll tell you why this hits home. I actually happened to use Zola myself for my wedding registry a couple years ago, and so I was very familiar with the platform. And there's a full functionality behind the scenes within Zola where guests can help buy gifts for you through a registry. They can buy gift cards, or they can actually give you cash, and then you have to tie your bank account. And there's other methods and processes, but at some point, one or another, if money is involved, they want you to link a bank account to be able to pull those funds back, your wedding fund, or house fund or honeymoon fund, back as part of your registry gifts. It just so happens that there was a period of time where a lot of people were doing a good old classic credential stuffing attack, right? That's where we're talking, where hackers, they test out emails and passwords and these combinations that were stolen from other breaches across the internet and other websites and forums and things of that nature. And this is just one of those real classic password reuse cases where if your credentials are found on another website, there's a very high likelihood that your email and password can also be used in other places. And now it looks like Zillow has been added to the list of websites that these dumps, right, of credentials are being tested and used on, especially because at the end of the day, there is a little bit of financial, transactional backing as a user of this website. And so luckily, I was not one of the victims. In fact, they do say that fewer than 0.1% was affected. But for those that were affected, the ability to purchase gift cards from those bank transactions and that funds available, people were buying gift cards. And it just by the way, it just so happens that gift cards is totally the criminal economy these days on laundering, because it's very easy to sell gift cards in a digital domain. So it's kind of works in line with that.
And it's important to note too that like the accounts that were hacked, right? So this was not a breach necessarily of Zola itself. This is, like we said, credential stuffing attacks. But it was clearly targeted enough because there were posts across social media about people talking about how their linked bank accounts were being used to purchase these gift cards. And then it's also important to note that cash fund transfers, like direct cash transfers, were blocked by Zola. And so they've already sent out a mass email informing their users and changing their account passwords. They've automatically reset everyone's passwords. And
there's one key detail here, right?
Right.
How could this potentially been avoided using, password reuse and credential stuffing? Two-factor
authentication. And that's the next thing that I was just about to cover is that.
Sorry, I'm reading your mind.
Yeah, you're reading my mind. It's not like we have the same article up. I know. Looking at it. But reporters from TechCrunch, noted that Zola does not use two-factor authentication or provide two-factor authentication options for all of the user accounts, which is going to make a credential stuffing attack way easier. I mean, honestly, with two-factor authentication, it still wouldn't be good security practice, but you could have the same password for every single website, right? Like,
I wouldn't say you should, but it puts you in a little bit of a better light.
Yeah, you should not do that, even if you're using two-factor authentication everywhere. But adding that extra layer in there makes an attack like this so much harder. And Zola did note, though, that they use adaptive two-factor authentication, which is, that's the same thing that we're all familiar with, right? It's like, okay, we've noticed that you're logging in from a strange location, or you've tried one too many times, so it will send an email with the code to you, you know, but that's really not, I don't consider that actual two-factor authentication by any stretch of the
That's not
imagination.
authentication. It's two-factor notification.
Right, exactly. That's just letting you know that something happened and giving you the code. But honestly, you know, if you're reusing your password already and you're part of a credential stuffing attack like this, even if they did trigger it and send an email, there's a good chance that whoever's doing this also has access to your email.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and just to do a little plug here, because we got to plug. Is your organization having challenges around identity access and safe credential storage? Well, go ahead and talk to GuidePoint Security today, or as soon as possible. We can help you with different kinds of programs around identity access management, privilege access management, and everything in between. So come talk to the experts and get all those password problems solved.
It almost sounds like you have that written down.
No, I'm all on board with this, and
well, they've committed to expanding their two-factor authentication options, and hopefully the recent pushes by Google, Microsoft, Apple to really expand FIDO and work together to kind of remove the need for passwords at all across the majority of the internet. Hopefully that really starts to pay off and we start seeing a lot more adoption of two-factor authentication and individual, time-based login codes and things like that.
I agree.
So
In fact, I'm sorry, but I think that, to interrupt you, I think that is the perfect segue for our final little tidbit that I was so excited about talking about this week. I know, I'm sorry, I'm just interrupting things left and right because
you're good.
A couple minutes and I want to talk about this one thing.
For sure.
Right. And that one thing is that the Verizon DBIR has been released. Right. This is really cool. An annual report on what's going on in the state of security. Which, by the way, this is their 15th annual report.
The thing about it is, growing up as a child, if me had traveled back in time, if I had traveled back in time to find young me and been like, one day you will be excited about an annual report about cybersecurity being released, I would not have believed it at all. I would be like, that sounds like the most boring thing in the world, but it is actually like kind of cool.
It is. It's super cool, right? So check this out. 20,000 security incidents with over 5,000 of them actually confirmed data breaches were part of this report. And to completely relate to the Zola issue with the credential stuffing, stolen credentials accounted for nearly 50% of the attacks. I mean, this is not a new issue. This is not a new problem. This is a repetitive problem when we're constantly dealing with this.
Yeah. And it's also very interesting, comparing it to, like, I don't have the 2021 report up in front of me right now. But I remember this being like also just a hugely significant statistic last year. Right. Like it's one of those things that just doesn't change. We recently had World Password Day. We wrote a quick blog about it and put it out. And when I put that blog together, I just called it "What's Old is New Again," because the statistics were exactly the same almost, right? Like the most used passwords last year were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the second most used was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And like, lest you be worried that it was just numbers all the way down, the third most used password was like password 1, 2, 3, 4. So we really got creative with it, right? Like it stays the same every year. And these things just kind of like are repeated over and over again. And that's why it's exciting to look at this report, see where things lie right now, at least to me, and then think about the things that we've talked about recently and the way that the world is starting to change and shift its perspective on this, so that hopefully a year or two from now, the report's coming out and we see much lower numbers coming through.
You hope. I love your optimism. Well, so it just so happens, so the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, or DBIR, did focus on something new and interesting. What's happening is vulnerabilities, actually, aside from the fact that credentials will continue to be an issue, vulnerabilities, a lot of these crime organizations, as soon as a vulnerability is published, right, or like a CVE has been made public, especially if there's some kind of proof of concept of POC, we're having bots. What they're doing is they're identifying systems, and then we're having separate bots that are checking versions of the software, and finally we have bots that are trying to do the exploit. And so there is a lot of automation that's happening. So when the newest and latest vulnerabilities are released, and furthermore, potentially even a proof of concept is uploaded to something like GitHub, we're immediately seeing those kinds of things being used and against targets, and so that's one of the interesting key highlights. And that the other one, and I'm going to have to say this has to do a lot with some of the supply chain stuff we've had in the past couple months, without naming any particular names, but a very large number, in fact, 61% of system intrusion instances that were part of their report that they've noticed stemmed from supply chain breaches. And so that's
Everything
also
layers. It's
yeah,
all layers.
it has been very big this year for a lot of individuals
Yeah.
that have been affected by it. So I think that kind of rounds up some of the highlights. I think everybody should go out and check out the Verizon report. It is now
Absolutely.
available online, not even behind a paywall. You can just click it and download
One of my
and view
favorite
it.
things about it.
All 108 pages of goodness. So
108 of them. And to do a quick plug again, just because you mentioned the vulnerabilities and the automated scanning and stuff, one of the things that I've worked on here that was a lot of fun was working on starting our pen testing as a service, offering and getting that rolled out, and working with Todd, the leader of that team. And when we talk about hackers and adversaries using bots to crawl through and look for ports, look for a vulnerable piece of software, and then exploit a vulnerability against it, that's the same thing that like pen testing as a service platforms offer. So you're taking that same approach to securing your stuff, and it's working continuously as opposed to that big once a year penetration test that you might normally do. So if that's something that's of interest to you, that's something that we offer here at GuidePoint. And so we're at the top of the hour. We're 1 minute over. I know that you've got stuff to go do that is probably much more important than anything I'm about to go do.
This is the highlight of my week.
This is the highlight of everyone's week, Jonathan.
Good.
Everyone who's involved in this call. That's me and you. So, we'll do our normal plugs here. You can head to guidepointsecurity.com to look at the things that we've already mentioned that we offer. There's also GuidePoint Security University, which is a way to, build your skills in cybersecurity and try and shrink that cybersecurity skills gap. So if you know people who are interested in getting into cybersecurity, you can point them that direction to try and learn some of the basics and work their way into that program. And then all of our stories this week, again, to cover it down really quickly, we used an article from Tech Target as a kind of overview of the Verizon data breach incident report. We had spacenews.com for the satellites. We had the Wall Street Journal for Twitter paying $150 million fine. And we found the story about Zola on theverge.com. And so with that, I have been, and as always, will continue to be, Tristan Morris.
And I'm Jonathan Singer.
And thank you so much for joining us for GPS Live, and we will see you again next week. Same bat time.
Next week.
Oh, that's right. That's actually right. Both Jonathan and I happen to be off next week. So
in 2 weeks.
We'll see you in 2 weeks' time, unless we can get someone to fill in for us and we can get them trained up on how to do this. So with that being said, thanks so much, folks. Hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.